Hey, welcome to another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast show. I'm your host, Lindsay Phillips, and if we haven't met yet, I'm so glad that you're here joining us. And I want to talk today about stories because after hosting a podcast for 10 years and guesting on hundreds of shows, and repurposing podcast episodes, doing interview impact reviews. I've analyzed so many guest interviews, and there's one thing that I've noticed that guests don't leverage stories enough. They either don't tell any at all, or they're the wrong ones, or they shortchange themselves and give a story that doesn't talk about their clients, or they don't give any details, or they lose the listener by going on and on and on. I'm sure you've heard those. Believe me, I've been guilty as well. I used to only give facts and tips. And unfortunately, facts tell and stories sell, but not just any story. So I'm not talking about your origin story or how I started my business or how I grew it. I'm talking about strategic stories, the kind that illustrate your expertise in action. They show how you think. They demonstrate the transformation that you create. They let the listener picture what it's like to work with you. Because here is the truth: listeners hire you when they can see your work demonstrated, when they can picture what it's like to work with you, when they have clarity. And the stories create clarity faster than bullet points ever will. So if you say something like, I help clients refine their messaging, that's a claim. But when you say, I worked with a leadership coach who kept saying, I help with growth. And in 20 minutes, we uncovered that her real differentiator, that's a hard word to say, was helping teams rebuild trust after rapid scaling. Now they can see you working. They can understand your brain and your value in action. Now, stories do three critical things in podcast interviews. Number one, they make abstract ideas concrete. So, stories can show them something in motion, in action. So, instead of saying that you need a strong call to action, if you tell a story about a guest who ended the episode with follow me on Instagram and how changing that specific invitation doubled his consultation bookings, now the listener is leaning in, right? The lesson sticks. It helps them picture it. Second is that stories build authority without bragging. That's actually a reason why a lot of people hold back on telling stories. They don't want to feel like they're sharing testimonials. They don't want to feel like they're bragging about what it is that they're doing. And if you do list credentials, I've done this, I've done that, I have this, totally, it can feel super self promotional. But if you tell a client story that demonstrates what the problem was, what you did to help them, and the results, then your authority becomes more obvious in a way that's not salesy. You don't have to say you're an expert. The story kind of tells that story as it is. The story proves it. Thirdly, is that stories help the listener see themselves. This is a big one because when you describe a client who was guesting regularly, they felt confident, but they weren't getting leads. Your ideal listener is thinking, oh, that's me. So when you're like painting a picture, um, I don't know, even if it was someone that had stomach issues, and let's say you were a nutritionist and they felt like they couldn't go outside and they were missing out on spending time with their grandkids and they were deflated, they were becoming depressed. When you paint that picture, the listener in the audience can better relate. You want them to self identify. And if you do that early on in the show, in the podcast that you guest on, then you're compelling them and you're pulling them into the episode. And then they're like, What does this person have to say that's going to help me with that? So you're compelling them to listen to more. And then when you describe the shift in your story, they feel hope. And that emotional identification moves them from a passive listener to a potential client. They see you as the solution. They are positioning tools. And they allow you to like seed your offers, showcase your frameworks, anchor your expertise. And then your call to action at the end feels natural instead of salesy. There's no disconnect. When stories are done poorly, they can be rambling. They can be super distracting. They can confuse the listener and not even really understand what it is that you do. And it can dilute your authority. And so over the years, I've noticed that the most effective guest stories or story sound bites, whatever you want to call them, have three intentional parts. And a sound bite, so when you make it small, tight, concise, it helps the listener to feel, to picture, and understand your work in a way that's easy to hear, easy to understand, and digest. The first is the emotional hook. You need that first. Again, where I said that's the part where listeners need to identify and think, oh, that's me. So you're describing the moment before things changed. What was their struggle? What was the frustration? What was the confusion? So not just like the surface issue, like, um, a guest wasn't getting clients from their guest interviews. You might say something more like, a client came to me after doing 30 podcast interviews. The host loved them. The conversations were great. But afterwards, nothing, no leads, no inquiries, and they were starting to think that podcast guesting just didn't work. And he actually began to lose confidence in his speaking, in his message, and even in what it was that he did. So that gives more detail and also shares what the person was feeling and how it was impacting them. So that the listener then can recognize the situation. They lean in because they relate, right? It's got more of an emotional hook. The second is the result, of course. You want to share the end result, the transformation that you've helped create. You want the listener to think, ooh, I want that result. And this is where a lot of guests will actually shortchange themselves. They'll rush through or they will generalize the result or only share numbers. So, like, oh, he made 10,000K. That's not enough, right? You need to really open that up a little bit more and paint the picture of what changed. He made $10,000 and that allowed him to go on vacation with his family. They had the best time. Or that 10K, he was able to invest in his business and do XYZ. And he felt so much more confident in his business. He was impacting more lives. You get the picture. So you need to expand it a little bit more. So, like, how did their day to day feel differently? Did they start getting the right leads right away? Did their conversations become easier? Did they feel confident showing up on interviews? So, like, how did they feel and how did it impact their life? Again, I always use the phrase painting a picture. That has always helped me because I used to be super stuck on stories. I actually used to think that that I didn't have stories. I didn't have these, huge, oh, someone did this and then they made $100,000 or it changed their life immensely. It doesn't have to be this massive life changing, life altering story. It can be anything. It can be an aha, a shift. Yes, money obviously is a big one, but they lost 10 pounds and they were able to have more mobility. They felt more confident wearing jeans. Like, there's so many little nuances, and any little step that your clients take is huge, and you want to showcase those. And of course, we don't want to forget the how. So many guests skip this. And this is really where your expertise becomes visible because you're able to explain the shift, the method, the framework, the exercises that you use that are proprietary to you, what programs that they were in, a process that you have that made the result possible. And this is where, again, most guests accidentally hold back. They're vague because they're worried about sounding salesy or giving away too much. But that specificity actually builds credibility. If I just said that, um, I help clients, um, create great content, that's just so vague. If I said I took their magic and their expertise and their episodes on podcasts, pulled out what makes them unique, attracted their avatar, and created content easily that brought them more leads and clients and visibility opportunities, that still is a little bit more general, but it's expanding a little bit. But you would want to give a story on specifics. And that actually wasn't a very good story. But so instead of saying, I help him improve his messaging, here's a better example. Instead of saying I help someone improve his messaging, you could say we identified the one story that illustrated his framework, tightened it into a 60-second story soundbite, and made sure that it led to his offer. That explains a little bit more of what I've done with someone. Now the listener can picture your process, because when someone can picture what it's like to work with you, they start seeing you as the solution. Here's another example. So Patricia, she was in my story soundbite builder workshop, and she was very vague in her stories. She said that she, worked with a woman and she had a custom package, helped her understand her numbers, and now she has money in the bank, is able to now go out with friends, go out for dinner and do the things that she enjoys. That last part was great, but I was like, there's more in here. And so I started to ask her more questions. And I'm like, okay, you kind of skipped over the part where what you did with the client. I'm like, sure, you had a custom, package and it was custom to her and you helped her understand her numbers, but you're an expert in this field. I'm sure that you are underselling yourself and you actually did more than that. So I started asking her questions and I pulled out so much more information. So get this. So she did inventory of banking. She looked at the investments. She looked at expenses. She made budgets, did projections, made a plan for spending and saving, and empowered her client to make decisions so that she could have a fabulous life and have a secure future. So, do you see how the difference is? And so Patricia was like, oh, she didn't realize that by not getting specific about what her process was, or her frameworks, or her exercises, they had names to them. She didn't realize that she was undervaluing herself in that process. And though it was actually amazing because she was like, oh, I now see the real impact of my work. And when you talk about it with confidence like that, instead of brushing it aside, then the audience of the show that you're on, then they can see how different you are. They can see what it is that you're doing with your clients and the impact that you're bringing them. They don't have to be long. They don't have to be complicated. And as I said, they don't have to have some massive transformation where someone went from $1 to $1 million. It just has to show an aha, a shift, a result of some kind, and showcasing your expertise in a way that helps the listener understand what it is that you do. So, if this idea of story sound bites is resonating with you, I'm actually opening up a few story sound bite sessions. It's 2 hours working with me one on one. We'll work together. I'll pull the information and your brilliance out and craft 3 to 4 strategic stories that you can use in your podcast interviews. But you can also use them in social media, in emails, like anywhere that you're showing up in all of your marketing. And I'll guide you through shaping them so that you hook the listener, illustrate your expertise, and naturally lead to your offers. You'll also get access to my story soundbite builder, my GPT, so that you can continue to make even more stories after the session. So I'm opening up 5 spots right now. They're only $297 for the next few weeks. The price will be going up. So if you'd like one, message me, find me on social and DM me, or you can email me at Lindsay, Lyndsay, at smoothbusinessgrowth.com, and I'll share the details with you. And so I really want to encourage you to think about the stories that you have. I didn't think I had any. I've learned over the years, and I know you have amazing stories, amazing expertise that can be pulled out and really help impact the results that you're getting when you're guesting on podcasts. So I will see you in a couple of weeks. And if you do want to snag one of my story soundbite sessions, then shoot me an email, Lindsay at smoothbusinessgrowth.com. And it's Lyndsay. And have a great one. Bye.